Hello and welcome back to 1874. It's time for the weekly podcast show with myself, Dan Bardell, and the Athletics' Gregg Evans to look back on Aston Villa 1, West Ham 1. Disappointing day at Villa Park, or disappointing second half at Villa Park, it has to be said. This show is sponsored as ever by NordVPN, so if you want to get a huge discount and 4 months free, head to 1874.io/NordVPN. It's completely risk-free because Nord offer a 30-day money-back guarantee, and obviously the 4 months free is very, very nice. Greg, how are you?
I'm all right, Dan. Thanks. Yeah, good morning. Been a relatively quiet weekend for me, but I watched the game yesterday, and yeah, I suppose similar thoughts to you. Disappointing second half, wasn't it?
Yeah, I thought first half Villa played some nice stuff. You know, that was shown when they scored. Lovely constructed move, great 1-2 between Watkins and Ramsey. Brilliant to see him on the score sheet again. And I felt around that first 20 minutes, Villa played some really nice stuff. There's no doubt though that the game kind of hinged on Tyrone Mings going off. For me, Villa have obviously left themselves very short at centre back at this current time. Pau Torres is injured. Diego Carlos has obviously been sold to Fenerbahce last week. You've got Bogard on the bench, but I think if Konsa had gone off injured, Emery said it as much at the end of the game that Bogard would have come on and replaced him, but he wanted a left footer there. So Luca Dean, as predicted by Jacob a few weeks ago, actually stepped in at left centre back and Maatsen came on. But there's no doubt Villa just weren't the same and just couldn't get going. And that injury was a huge blow in the tail of the game, really.
Yeah, absolutely, no doubt at all. They were a completely different team when Tyrone Mings went off. I think that Villa. I think we agree that Villa look more solid defensively when Tyrone Mings plays. But I think if you just take away his defensive qualities for a second and just look at the way that it affected the balance of the team, that was the biggest sort of takeaway for me. I thought Luca Dean struggled, to be honest, at left centre back. Not his best, not his most comfortable position, and he's had to fill in and do a job there. Unfortunately, Villa have been able to get away with getting a point really from the game because it could have gone horribly wrong in that second half. But yeah, I thought he struggled. I thought he just didn't look comfortable there. And Konsa was pretty much holding the defence together towards the end, I'd have said.
Yeah, I thought Konsa was absolutely outstanding yesterday. Some real key interventions and really kind of carried the back line on his shoulders, him and Cash on that side. I felt the left-hand side, it was always going to be a bit messy. With that, I doubt it's something Villa have even worked on. I understand the rationale for him wanting to play Luca Dean there and keeping a left footer there. Obviously, it's really important to the way Villa built up. But it just didn't work. It didn't work defensively, and I don't think it really helped Villa with their build-up play either. I guess the good news is, Greg, is that Tyrone Mings has posted on socials after the game saying, I've had bad knee injuries before. This isn't one of them. I have to admit, I was fearing the worst. I was sat in a different place yesterday and I was a bit closer and I could see his face. He looked absolutely devastated. You could see he was in pain, and because it's his knee, you automatically fear the worst. And then this morning, a really good account on Instagram that I follow, they've kind of injury experts called Physio Scout. They basically predict what's going to happen with injuries from what they've seen and their knowledge of injuries. And they're very rarely wrong, in all honesty. So they've said Tyrone Mings was taken off early in the first half after suffering a knee injury. Initially thought it was the right knee that was injured after Kudus made contact. However, it was the left knee that was injured in this case. High velocity blow to the left knee brings concern for just a bruise/contusion injury. Slight concern for a minor MCL sprain, but that's about it. So the recovery time, if it's a bone bruise or contusion, I'm not even saying that right, am I? Is less than a week. And if it's the second one, the minor MCL sprain, it's 1 to 2 weeks. So the prognosis at the moment, Greg, although Villa will do some more tests today, is that Tyrone Mings will be okay and it won't be a big injury. But we've still got big games coming up in the meantime, Greg, where they're going to have to come up with a solution, which either is they dip into the transfer market, which I know they're planning to do anyway, or they find something from within. How do you see that unfolding over the next week?
To be honest, it's all a bit messy, isn't it? And I think, yeah, part of it is by default, but also some of it is a little bit unfortunate for Villa, obviously, because Mings and Torres are both injured. So, you know, it's very unusual that you have two of your top three defenders out. But football clubs that want to finish in the top four of the Premier League need to be prepared for this. So it's making the Diego Carlos sale look a little bit, I'm trying to think of the right word, but
naive.
Look, I mean, look, it's You couldn't have planned for another injury, could you? That's the only thing. You've got to always be concerned that it could happen, but you
Guys have
but
Villa did
but you
before.
but you can't.
No,
It's a difficult one to analyse, really. I just think that Villa have missed out on a couple of defenders in the past two transfer windows. Now they tried to sign Loic Bade in this window, and for contrasting reasons, he's not coming to Villa, not in this transfer window anyway. In the last window, they tried to sign Luciano Gatrida, weren't able to get that done because of the financials around it. So there is a little bit of frustration there amongst Emery and his team, because they're trying to get players in, but they aren't able to do it at the moment. And defensively, Villa have looked at it now for a couple of windows and haven't been able to strengthen in the way that they want to. So going into a game now, a big game, or a massive game against Celtic, with one fit senior centre half in Ezri Konsa, and what are they going to do? They're going to put Lamar Bogard there. They're going to play Luca Dean there again, or maybe even an alternative. Boubacar Kamara, who we should say was exceptional yesterday again. Perhaps even he's an option at centre half, because he has played there in his younger years, and he could be somebody that they turn to. But it's just not ideal for Villa at the moment, because they're at a crunch point in the season where the league position is starting to slightly fade away now with every sort of game that passes without a victory. I speak to a lot of friends directly after games, and quite a few of them text me yesterday saying we're heading towards a mid-table finish here, Greg. Not comfortable now. I think that's a bit of a quick reaction on the back of probably a disappointing result, but. Villa can't keep dropping points if they want to finish in the top four. They are only 4 points behind Manchester City, but they're still 8th, and there's lots of teams ahead of them now. And the way you look at the Newcastles and Bournemouth, even Nottingham Forest have got quite a good buffer ahead of Villa. Chelsea are still performing quite well. Manchester City seem to be coming back towards somewhere at least near their best in the Premier League. It's going to be difficult for Villa. So this defensive issue that they have at the moment, which bordering on a crisis, isn't it, in some ways?
I think it is a crisis when you've only got one senior centre half.
Need to get it sorted. And look, there's 3 days left of the transfer window, and Villa have already missed out on one of their key top targets. So yes, that we know that Unai Emery's been looking at Wamforth for a long time at Villarreal. He likes his versatility because he can play on the right side and in central defence, and sometimes even slightly further forward if really needed. But any other player that Villa get in now, that he knows he's not going to have been the first choice. So
it's difficult, isn't it? Because even if they're on 1/4, he's not a left centre back, so it doesn't. I don't think it solves it, and he can't play on Wednesday anyway. So I'm not sure that solves it. That's what they want anyway, isn't it? That centre back and right back. I get that, but it doesn't solve the short term problems.
No, there's the short term. There are short term issues for Villa. They've got to get through this Celtic game somehow, win the game, and hope that one of the results above them goes in their favour. Which I think if Villa win the game, I do think they'll finish 8th, because they'll finish in the top 8, because there are so many teams above them that can still drop points. And if you're a betting man and you put accumulators on, it's very rare that you get 5 or 6 results that you expect to win every single time. So that's what I would say to concerned Villa fans. Go and put an accumulator on all the results that you think will go against Villa, and see if they all come in, because typically they don't do that. It's so hard to predict results. So I do think if Villa beat Celtic, they'll be okay. But and look, Celtic are going to be affected in their forward line, because they've lost. I think Kyogo's gone to. Is he going to Rennes, or has he gone?
Yeah.
And so that's going to be a big loss. Maeda's suspended, having been sent off in the previous game, so they're going to be short. And look, a pumped up Villa part, you'd back Villa to get it done, but the short term issues are there, and they're just they need to get through it now.
Yeah, I mean, I'd agree with Jerry Cusack here. Playing with fire and how we've managed our centre-backs, a risk to rely on Mings after a terrible injury and still looking for a replacement to Carlos. I would agree with that. And as I said earlier, Villa did this in the Championship. They did it. They left themselves short with 2 centre-backs, and then James Chester got injured. And that first half of the season, it was a real struggle because they just didn't have the personnel to come in and play. They're going to have to do something. My kind of short-term, like off-the-cuff reaction is that Kamara's going to have to go and play there, and they put McGinn in the central midfield because he'll offer some of the hustle and bustle that Kamara offers in the midfield area. He's left-footed in front of Kamara, which might help. That's my kind of short-term fix for it, but we'll talk more about that in the preview to the Celtic game on the channel. Let's go back to the goal, Greg. It was a well-constructed goal. Nice play from Watkins and Ramsey. Brilliant to see Ramsey on the score sheet. Again, feels like it's been a while since he scored at Villa Park. In fact, it was probably Brighton last season, which I think was October, if my memory serves me correctly.
Yeah.
It was a smart finish, wasn't it? And good to see him back in the team and hopefully getting somewhere near back to that level. That goal will do him good.
Oh yeah, definitely. And look, I love his reaction when he scores, because he doesn't get too carried away. He's just like, yeah, I know I can do this. Just need to do it more often. And we need to see it more often from Ramsey. We need to see him available in the team and playing, because he can make a big difference. I think the way that Villa started the game, really, really impressive. The first 15 minutes I was watching thinking, if Villa get a second, this game's over, because, West Ham were just nowhere to be seen. And some of the interplay between Rodgers and Watkins and Ramsey was excellent, really exciting to watch. And I thought Villa started the game really well. Great goal. But then it just started to unfold a little bit from there, didn't it? It was not a drastic drop off, but almost a gradual one. And you felt that West Ham were just starting to grow into the game a little bit as the half-time period loomed. And then in the second half, they were the much better team.
Yeah. I think West Ham are a useful team, and that obviously going to be a little bit better under Potter. But I just thought the drop off from Villa from the first 20 minutes to the rest of the game was huge, and it's compounded by Mings going off. I completely understand that. West Ham have got some good attacking players, some of them the kind of players that have caused Villa problems in the past. But there's no doubting in the second half, Greg. I said this on X last night, or Twitter, whatever you want to call it nowadays. Villa this season, more so than last season for me, where it was just a bad end to the season because of injuries and fitness and fatigue. Villa this season seem a lot more capable of just dropping an absolute stinker of a half, or even two halves of football. And that seems to be the difference, and it seems to happen more frequently than I would like.
Yeah, and look, we discussed this at the start of the season, didn't we? We said that the Champions League schedule was going to be difficult for Villa. To match a Champions League run with a Premier League schedule is tough, and it's now 6 games Villa have gone without winning directly after a Champions League game. There is a hangover there. I had to look back at Unai Emery's results when he was manager of Villarreal this morning, and it was nowhere near
sensational prep there, Greg. That's not what we do here.
Yeah, well, I do. I don't know about you, but I tend to prepare. Yeah, and it was nowhere near as bad there. Villarreal famously got to the semi-final of the Champions League under Unai Emery, lost to Liverpool over a 2-legged semi-final, but they were managing the league form quite well, during the group stage of the Champions League. Yeah, it was a little bit different, and because there was only 6 games, and not quite as intense in terms of the game load, but they were managing it. They were winning games in the Champions League and then going on and picking up results in the league. And now Villa just aren't doing that now. They did it after the young boys game. They went and beat Wolves directly after that. But since then, they haven't won a single game. And it is becoming a concern. And if you're looking at some of the stats around some of Villa's performances, they're not running as hard in the Premier League games as they used to. Fewer distances covered during games. So are they tired? Perhaps they are, yeah. And there's always this mental fatigue that you have to remember as well, because it is taxing working under Unai Emery. And there was a period where Villa went on their horrendous run under Emery this season, which, we can't forget the fact that Villa are still within 4 points of 4th place and have been on this really bad run at, a couple of months back. There was a point where I was starting to hear whispers that if this doesn't continue, there was real concerns that the players would start to lose faith with what was being asked of them, because Emery's so intense and so demanding. And he asks an incredible amount from the players. And when results aren't going well, players start to slowly check out of that. And Fortunately, actually, Emery decided to drop off a little bit. He wasn't as intense during those weeks, and during those closing weeks anyway. And he realised that maybe he needed to change a little bit and just let the players actually get on with it. And look, Villa got out of that run, didn't they? But
Yeah.
it's a very stop-start, stuttering, bitty season, isn't it? It just feels like we were hoping to see more from Villa in the Premier League. To see if they could kick on and at least match that 4th place finish from last season, but not quite as sharp in the Premier League. The offset is Champions League form's been pretty good, and gearing up to this big game against Celtic, which if they win, they've got a very good chance of finishing in the top 8.
Yeah, Villa. I think last season we were kind of setting the pace, so we were already kind of consolidated in where we wanted to be, and teams had to catch us. I think this season has seemed more frustrating, especially when there's a bad result, because you're chasing. And when you lose or you draw, it feels like the end of the world because invariably you're not making up ground on someone above you. And as you said earlier, there is heavy traffic now above us to get in the top 4, get in the top 5. I still think 5th has got to be the aim, and you just hope that it's enough for Champions League football. At the moment, it looks like that would be. But then we were sat here saying this time last year, and then it turned out that it wasn't. A lot will depend on how the English team do in Europe. That's me absolutely stating the obvious there. But I think that is the thing that makes it more frustrating because Champions League is the aim, like it ended up being last season. But other teams are trying to chase you, whereas now we're trying to get through this traffic.
Yeah, and look, it is congested up there, but it's a surprise congestion, isn't it? Because if you think at the back end of last season, Villa were going head to head with Tottenham, weren't they, for a long time? And if you look at Tottenham, how they've dropped off now, Manchester United are getting nowhere nearer the positions that we thought they might at some point. You always have it in the back of your mind, don't you, that Manchester United are going to get better at some point, but they just haven't. So it's almost been a season for the sort of middle to lower ranking teams to have a chance to really express themselves and show what they're made of. And I suppose the best examples of that reflected in the league are Nottingham Forest and Bournemouth, who are doing excellent and played against each other at the weekend. So, but you've also got the likes of Fulham and Brentford, who are there to try and cause issues. And Newcastle and Chelsea are much more improved, aren't they, from last year? Villa's season is starting to feel a little bit like Newcastle's last year in some
Not quite
ways.
as bad though.
Not quite as bad. And to be fair to Newcastle, they had a lot more injuries to deal with than Villa have at the moment. But perhaps a slightly lazy comparison, but just the fact that they were into the Champions League for the first time in a long time, and just struggled with the loads.
Yeah. Greg, we've got 10 minutes because I know you've got some important business to attend to, probably on the golf course today.
No, definitely not.
No, it's not golf course. Okay, I assumed it wrong. You got Snood on ready as well. It felt like it could be golf related. So what I want to do is I want to spend 5 minutes talking about Duran and Watkins and then 5 minutes talking about the second round of substitutions that Unai Emery made in that game. You obviously watched on television. I've seen it back since. I heard Jamie Carragher talking about the Watkins and Duran situation. I probably will do a longer video on this at some point this week. I actually agreed with quite a lot of what Jamie Carragher said, in that it's not doing Villa any favours. Watkins is on the pitch knowing he's probably going to be coming off after 60, 70 minutes like he did against West Ham on Sunday. And then Duran's coming on, and I think he struggled to impact the guy. I didn't think any of Villa's subs worked yesterday, by the way. It was just one of those days. Nothing we tried to do tactically came off. But that was a game yesterday I watched where I thought Watkins has got an assist in the game, but then he's come off on 60, 70, looks a bit despondent, looks a bit disheartened at having to come off when in his eyes he's probably done all he can in that game. There was no service really to him. It wasn't like he was missing chances. And then Duran comes on and really struggles to get in the game. And that's when the two strikers, things having two really good strikers, that's when it starts to feel a little bit like a problem.
Yeah, it's a really good point, isn't it? And to be honest, I mean, it's amazing, isn't it, how we can almost flip having two really good
changed
strikers
yesterday
to make it into a problem. I mean, it's bizarre, isn't it? Most Premier League clubs would absolutely love to have Watkins and Duran, or two equally as good strikers available to them. Yet here we are talking about it being a problem for Villa. It's mad, isn't it? I mean, when you actually just break it down, it's actually mad that it's a problem. But I totally agree with you, and I totally agree with the points that you're making. it's frustrating for Watkins knowing that he's going to come off after 60 minutes. We know that Ollie Watkins is a player that thrives on being the number one, being loved, knowing that he's got the 90 minutes to play. And absolutely no coincidence that when Danny Ings left and Watkins was the go-to guy who played almost every minute, he had his best run of form. He scored lots of goals, was very consistent, reliable. And now, you see his face when he goes off and you just think, you know what's going through his head. You know that he knows this is happening. He's had 60 minutes, which is double the amount of time that Duran gets. So, he's lucky in that respect. But sometimes it's not enough because, those closing stages of the games, where any striker will tell you, are the moments where they get more chances because, the defenders are slightly starting to tire. And somebody like Ollie Watkins with his explosive pace pounces on that. Now, when you look at Duran, he comes on, doesn't get enough time in the game to make an impact, has that one chance where he kind of creates it himself, doesn't really get many opportunities to hold up the ball. It's going to be frustrating for him as well because he's had a season where he proves that he should be a starting striker as well. And with 90 minutes, he's going to get probably plenty of chances to go and score a goal. So it's not working for Villa. It's amazing that we're talking about probably two of the best strikers in the Premier League being a problem for Villa. But at the moment it is. They've almost got to go. They've almost got to decide which one for me, I think. Do you play one striker in one game, one striker in another game like that, and balance the minutes out in that way? I think Ollie Watkins would have benefited from having 90 minutes yesterday rather than having 60 today and perhaps 60 against Celtic.
So I think Duran will start against Celtic.
One for 90 and another for 90. I think that might start to be the best way forward, at least in the short term. And then you've got the issue of, do Villa sell one of them at some point? But then you go back to the scenario of, well, if they sell one of those players, they're going to want to sign another player to try and build him up to be equally as good as them, because the long-term plan is to have two players again who were brilliant. So it's like a vicious circle.
Yeah, it's really hard. Yeah, I don't know the answer. I don't have the answer because there's obviously something really tangible there with John Duran. But when Ollie Watkins is on his game, I absolutely love him, and he'd be the first name on the team sheet for me when he's fully fit and he's fully firing. And I think it's impacting both at the moment. You could see it yesterday. You watch that game back, and if you just watched Watkins for the 60 minutes he was on, then watch that 30 minutes from Duran, I think you'd come to the conclusion that actually the situation's not good for either of them. Tom's right there to call out the 100 goal involvements for Ollie Watkins, quickest player since Kevin De Bruyne to reach 100 goal involvement. So that's a huge. That tells you that is huge. That tells you how good Ollie Watkins is to be the first player to do it since Kevin De Bruyne. I mean, and Russell Handy says what we're talking about. It's what the kids call first world problems. I think he's probably right. There will be a solution. I think
Russell's right, isn't he? Because if you, as I say, if I go back to what I just said, if you sell one of them, you've then got to get a replacement, and ideally, the aim is to then have the same problem again in the future. Because you don't just want to sign somebody who's not quite as good and think, oh, do you know what? We'll just sign a second-rate striker and let him be on the bench. The plan is to get a player that's equally as good.
Yeah, I did find myself I love Carragher and Neville and Keane and the Sky pundits, but I think Carragher watches so much football, and I think he's got such a deep understanding of the game. And when he talks, I tend to listen. And I think what he said, if you haven't seen it, go back and find it. I kind of found myself agreeing with a lot of what Jamie Carragher said after the game. Let's spend our last 5 minutes talking about substitutions. Then we kind of covered the first substitution in Luca Dean going to centre back, and then we've covered the second round with Duran coming on. It was the third round for me that really killed Villa yesterday. He took Rodgers and Ramsey off. One, I was surprised he took them both off at the same time. Two, I know Rodgers was not having a good game, but I think you've still got more chance of winning that football match with Morgan Rodgers on the pitch for 90 minutes. And when we took them off for McGinn and Buendia, who I've got nothing against either player, everyone knows how much I love John McGinn in particular. Those changes didn't work. He took off two ball carriers. McGinn couldn't get in the game in the number 10 position, really. I don't think it was a game for him to be number 10. I'd have probably shifted him to the left and put Buendia as the 10. And just as much as I like what Buendia is, and I like that he tries things that maybe other players wouldn't play, and he doesn't care about pass completion and stuff like that, but we lost something with Ramsey and Rodgers going off. And for me, when they went off, all chance of winning the game was gone. We actually got worse. And I was sat there thinking, West Ham are going to nick this here. And they did score. Obviously, it got disallowed. But I started to think that was where the game really got away from us. But I don't know how much difference it makes Emery not being in the dugout, how the decisions work. I don't know whether you know more about that than me. You probably do.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, look, it's Emery's direction still. Whether the fact that Emery wasn't on the sidelines played an impact in any of the players is another topic. But this was Emery's direction still. You know, he was informing Pablo and Paco the moves that he wants to make. I do feel like when he's not on the sidelines, Villa do lose something because he's so energetic and he guides his players through every single passage of play. And this is what he's like in the meetings as well, you know, before games. He will run through all passages of play, all expected movements. And if at one player or two players or a unit aren't performing the way that they want, the way that he wants them to, he can instruct them on the sidelines. When he's stuck up in the director's area, he can't do that. So perhaps Villa did lose something there. You don't know. But I do feel that he makes notable changes during games just by being on the sidelines himself. In terms of the substitutes, it's a difficult one, isn't it? Because Villa are in the middle of two really important Champions League games. So they have to manage the loads of the players. They can't overexert them. Villa have built this team, Villa have built this squad in the hope that if they withdraw a player, they can bring a player on who's of equal quality. But yesterday, none of those substitutes worked. They made Villa worse. Watkins and Duran for starters, that didn't help.
Marlon as well. I forgot about Marlon.
I mean, you know, Marlon for me, when he was on the ball, he looked okay. But for the first 10 minutes that he was on the pitch, I forgot he was on there. Genuinely, you know, he hardly touched the ball. Same for Buendia, totally anonymous up until late in the game where I think he had a long range shot that went over the ball again, went over the bar again. I forgot he was playing. So, you know, these are the players that have been brought on to make a difference, but have actually made Villa worse. And I think the longer that game had gone on, the more chance West Ham would have to win the game. And look, I mean, just something that I picked up on West Ham as well, which I've watched them a couple of times this season, and Wan-Bissaka's been brilliant for them every time I've watched. And I just think this is a guy that, you know, just didn't really show much attacking intent when he was at Manchester United. But the way he gets forward now, really impressive.
Yeah, I think I've always quite liked Wan-Bissaka. In all honesty, I think he was just
defensively,
a terrible environment against Manchester United. In all honesty,
never seen as much of him going forward like this. And look, for the second season running, you know, Lucas Paquetá, as frustrating as a player as he is with his sort of play, with his simulation and stuff, the best player on the pitch again for the second year running. I said this last year, and I think you disagreed with me, but you know, I really like watching him. So yeah, for an injury ravaged, patched up West Ham team, that was a pretty decent performance from them.
Yeah, just on Marlon, like you say, when he had the ball, he looked good. I haven't really watched it back to be honest, but I saw it on the screen after the game. Slight question marks, which is going to happen because he's not used to Villa at all. He did leave Cash a bit exposed for the goal. Cash had two men. There wasn't much he could do in that situation. Marlon was a bit in no man's land where he was standing actually defensively. Would we have been better off? It's easy to say this with hindsight. Would we have been better off, as Sean Reynolds is suggesting here, to play him in a 10 like Diarra?
Yeah, probably in hindsight now. I mean, he's going to need a little bit of time to get used to the new surroundings, settled into the place, to know what his teammates, you know, doing during games, and the movements that they make and the positions that he's expected to take up under Emery. You know, we remember when Morgan Rogers came in, he took a little bit of time to settle in, didn't we? So, you know, he needs time. Really, we will start judging him at the sort of start of next season. This is almost like a period for him to get settled in, but you know, Villa are in a moment where they really can't afford for this to happen. They need plug in and ready players, and yeah, just didn't really see that so much yesterday.
I'm sure it will come for Marlon though. He's a Champions League pedigree player. Played a lot of games at a really high level. It'll come right. It was tough for him yesterday. He came into a team that wasn't functioning very well yesterday in the second half. Like you said, every sub Villa made actually made them worse, which is the opposite effect, really, of what you want from a substitute. And for me, I know he was having a bad game, but Morgan Rogers is a 90-minute player. I think he'll just have that one moment where he'll make something happen for you, and we just lost that when he went off. I know he was running into cul-de-sacs, but for me, he needs to stay on the pitch.
Yeah, I just think that the withdrawal of Ramsey and Rodgers at the same time was probably the wrong move. Looking back on it, you don't like to criticise Emery because you feel like you know what he's doing, but looking back, it just felt like the wrong move, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, there's three people watching us on Twitch at the moment. Bit of a debate going around between Favalar and Villa fan Dan. I can't keep up with it to put it on the screen, but a real debate against Watkins and Duran going on there. So interesting to see that unfold on Twitch. Right, Greg, you need to go. I've already kept you 2 minutes longer than I should have done. We'll be back with the show later on in the week. We'll let NordVPN play us out now. Do take a look at what they offer because it is really, really helpful if you want to watch a little bit more football in your life. So, Greg, you can just depart. I'll let you go. And NordVPN will play us out. And please do all the things that I bang on about every single week. Only one thing. 1874 is proudly sponsored by NordVPN. So when you can't watch it, we want to help you. NordVPN is a secure and private service which works on pretty much any device, including your laptop, mobile, television. So if you want to watch some live content, it allows you to appear like you're in another country. And whilst you're connected, no one else can find out what you're doing, including your internet service provider. Beyond this, the service also has threat protection baked in to protect you from intrusive website ads and malware, which is pretty handy for you. As part of NordVPN support performance for free, this also includes Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. All you've got to do is go to 1874.io/NordVPN and sign up. All the details are also in the description. As always, we're very grateful to anyone that signs up. We know that money is tight, but if you think NordVPN will help you out, it will also help keep the channel running and help